This is Bible School Radio, KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, KYJC, Commerce, and KMWC, Bethany. On the web at kdkr.org and on all your devices with the Live 365 app. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, is a mortgage a financial asset in retirement? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. If you've got a question for me, you can always go to the site, and there's a link at the top of the page where you can ask a question. You can also go and schedule a phone call if you need to do so, if we can't handle it over the email. And I want to make sure that Prudent Money is a good resource there for you to help you out and get you the information that you need. That is all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, one of the things that I always stress and have stressed through all the time I've been on the radio is that I advise people to learn to think out of the box and think for yourself, doing what you feel led to do. And we can only go where we feel led is if we include God in the process. Versus what I always refer to as pop culture finance says for you to do. As we've talked about many times, the advice that comes out of pop culture finance is most of the time it's, well, if you do 1 plus 2 and you do 2, you'll always get 3. Well, money doesn't work quite that effortlessly to where you can just follow a couple of rules and you'll be okay. Because sometimes 1 plus 2 does equal 3, but sometimes 1 plus 2 equals 4. Sometimes it equals 5. Sometimes it just doesn't, like in those cases, doesn't make sense because you know 1 plus 2 equals 3. So this is why it's so very important, and I talk about it all the time, and I'll continue to talk about it with different examples, why we take what we hear, which is one side of the story, go hear the other side of the story, and then figure out where we stand. What are our beliefs versus what I call belief renting. And that's where you might be listening to someone on a financial media, and they're telling you that XYZ stock is the stock to be in. So you listen to that and you go, oh, that makes sense. And someone says you're talking to somebody about your investments, and you go, yeah, I just invested in XYZ stock. And the person you're talking to says, well, tell me why. And the gentleman would say, well, I don't know. It's just because the guy I listened to on the radio said that it was a great stock to be in, so I put my money into it. That's called belief renting your belief versus knowing both sides of the story and coming up with your own beliefs so you, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, but you own your own beliefs because you understand both sides. And so I come across these articles that I just say, this definitely needs the other side of the story. And some of them are thinking out of the box, all right, but maybe outside the wrong box. So the title of this particular article is Your Mortgage, and you heard me right, not your real estate, but your mortgage could be an important part of your retirement plan, according to financial experts. And it starts off, saving enough money for retirement is top of mind for many working adults. In fact, 53% of Americans feel behind on planning for retirement, according to a 2024 CNBC survey with SurveyMonkey. But you might be ignoring a key future asset you're paying for in the present, your home. Here's why financial experts say it might be smart to view your mortgage as part of your retirement savings instead of an expense. Now, this is taking an idea and stretching it pretty far, but let's go for it anyway and read it. It says, debt that pays it forward. You shouldn't necessarily think of your mortgage payments as burdensome expenses. Let me stop right there for a second. Why not? Because they are anything that you have to make as a payment for any certain amount of time is not far from what you would call a burdensome expense. But instead, they say it can be seen as healthy debt. Now, I'm a big believer in the theory of good debt versus bad debt. And I know that some of your big name financial people on Financial Talk Radio would say, oh, there's not such a thing as good debt or bad debt. It's all bad debt. But you see, the problem that you run into is that it's a little tough to carve out $400,000 or $500,000, $300,000, whatever you're going to spend to buy a house and pay cash for it. So a good debt is debt that is not putting a strain on your current finances, and good debt is not limiting your freedom in any way. And that's what I see people do is when they buy a house, they don't think through everything. They kind of generally do a checklist in their mind of the added expenses that they're going to incur, and they kind of rationalize, which is a really dangerous habit. That I can take care of the expenses. I can take care of what was going to be facing me on a month in, month out basis. I can take care of those property taxes without really taking a second to look to see exactly how much those property taxes could be. So if it's a good debt, then you can handle all that debt. You understand it. You're at a good interest rate. You didn't force the situation. You felt like you got a good value on the piece of property that you bought. It's good debt. You're using leverage in a good way. You're not going to be paying forever on that debt. You're going to eventually pay it off. You know when that date is. You're locked in. There's probably not a better candidate for good debt than a mortgage on a house if done correct, because you could do it the wrong way and then you would call it bad debt. But it depends. It depends on the cash flow, like I said. So it comes down, is it healthy debt, healthy to have a mortgage in retirement? Well, we're getting there. There's obviously unhealthy debt like credit cards and things like that, said a local advisor. And then there's debt that could pay it forward. One is student loans, obviously, right? And then the mortgage. I can't think of a scenario where accumulating loads and loads of student loan debt is healthy debt, good debt, whatever you want to call it, but on the positive side, because you're without question mortgaging your future. And a little bit of student loan debt, nothing wrong with that. You can use that to your advantage. You could use that as a way of paying for some of college. But you got to realize the government will let you borrow 100% of the cost for the entire time, as long as you don't have anything horrific on your credit report. And you can have a lot of bad things in your credit report and still get a student loan. So that's a little bit of a stretch. Student loan debt amounts to an enormous financial burden. Plus, the other thing is, I'm not convinced that you need a college education to be successful. So, if you think of it from that standpoint, student loan debt is I wouldn't necessarily call that an asset. But certain types of debt can be considered healthy, according to the article, because they help fulfill a need like education or shelter. And for the most part, you can expect to make consistent, predictable payments at a fixed rate. Your mortgage payment can be thought of as two parts, the interest and the principal amount of your loan. The only part of the payment that is a true expense is the interest. You can recover the interest you paid if you just decide to sell your home, but you are able to regain the dollar spent paying down the principal. Then it says, after you've paid off your mortgage, you recover some of the value of those payments that you made throughout the years when you sell your home, even though there are transaction costs involved, he says. This is where the article leaves the reader hanging. So here's what doesn't make sense to me. If I sell my home and I get back the dollars I put into it to pay the principal off, I don't get back the money that I paid in interest, but I do get more than likely some appreciation that I received in the home. Where's the shelter going to be? That's what's missing here, which is driving to a point that I'll make after the break. But where is the shelter? You had shelter, you sold your shelter, now what? Can't make this stuff up. This is straight from the article. This is Bob Brooks. Some more to come. We are up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
This week, as Alistair Begg wraps up the Encore 2024 series, we'll hear an important revelation Jesus made about himself and consider how we can prevent the devil from getting a foothold in our lives. Then we begin a brand new study in Jude. That's this week on Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, please go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Once you get to the site, top of the page, you can click through a link, and it will take you to the Q&A. And I would love to get your questions, and if I can help you in any way, I certainly want you to make sure that you know to ask. And send me an email. Let me know what's going on. And I'm happy to point you in the right direction, help you myself, or share some things in an email. Whatever I can do to help you, that's all at prudentmoney.com. So I'm talking about this article, which falls under the category of pop culture finance, which, if you are a new listener to the program, Pop Culture Finance is the financial media, Wall Street, financial services business, any type of business any type of business that is making money off of giving information about finances and personal finances, that sort of thing. So going on with this article, it says it's almost like forced savings. We're talking about mortgages on your home, a mortgage on your home. Your home serves as an important need in the present as shelter, and we talked about this for a second, but it's also a valuable investment for your long-term savings. Now, it gets a little bit more interesting. As the property appreciates, the option to sell your home in retirement becomes more viable. That cash can be factored into your retirement plan and take away possible worries about not saving enough. Yeah, so you go to worries about not saving enough to worries about where you're going to live. That's what maybe I'm missing the point of the article, but this says nothing about buying a new home or buying a home with part of the cash that you got out of the sale of your house, so that you have a place to live. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, a home is not shelter. A home is not an investment. It is shelter. And it goes on. But anyway, that the bottom line with a house is that a mortgage payment is obviously an expense. And you don't hear a lot talked about this, but I think there's a lot of wisdom behind this. You ideally, and I want to stress the word ideally, you get the mortgage paid off by the time you get into retirement. And by doing so, you have your shelter paid for. Now you may downsize, you may sell it, and you may increase the debt load on your particular spending plan by buying a bigger house. But you've got to have a place to stay, and whether that's a modest place up to a multi-million-dollar place, you've got to have shelter. Shelter comes in all forms and sizes. If you carry a mortgage, you carry an expense. If you have an expense, you have to save and invest more to make the payment to pay that expense. So the bottom line is, if you've paid off the mortgage, then you retire, you don't need as much money put back in investments to pay the mortgage expense. So it's a win-win situation all across the board. And that is the real story here. That is the story that I don't think people realize, is that there's such an advantage. And even people that I've talked to through the years who might be a little bit behind on their, for the retirement, do have a big asset, or will have a big asset, and that is their mortgage will be paid off. So that's something you don't have to worry about, and that is such a big part of the expense. Once again, it's shelter, not an investment. It's shelter that you want paid for in retirement. Now, let's say that you've got the cash flow. You can make the mortgage payment. Once again, we'll go back to the concept of good debt versus bad debt. It's good debt. It's debt that if you passed away tomorrow, your both you and your spouse passed away, your home could be sold. It could be the liability could be paid off. You've got money that you've put down 20-25% down. Now, if you're in retirement and you decide to increase your expenses by buying a house, and you increase it to the point that, man, this is a real burden, that could end up being in the bad debt column, which is what you don't want to do. So bottom line is, a paid off house can be a huge asset, both cash flow wise and shelter wise, and can be a positive for your overall retirement plan. But to me, that's where it stops from that standpoint. From the other standpoint, it can be part of your expenses because that is part of what you wanted at your retirement, was maybe a lake home, maybe a more expensive home, whatever it is. And you're willing to pay for that, and you're willing because you've got the cash flow to pay for it. So it's really two concepts on opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, here's the other thing that you don't really hear is that I know a lot of people who don't own a home who are renting and plan to rent through retirement. And I know that's always, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have a home paid off. Nothing wrong with renting. And it gives you freedom to do whatever you want to. There's a lot of advantages to renting. And you're not paying you're giving away the money that you pay for rent, but you're also not burdened with lots of various costs that go in to paying for a house. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. There's a lot of ways that it can make sense. The other thing that you can do to speed up, and we've brought this up before in the past, but I think it's good to bring it up again. To speed up paying off a property is to make one extra payment a year. Did you know that you can take a 30-year mortgage, and if you make one extra payment a year, then you can shave almost 7 years off of that mortgage. A 23-year mortgage sounds so much better than a 30-year mortgage. I think you'd agree. So you're looking at, and it's called bi-weekly payments. The whole concept is to pay a payment every 2 weeks. And so what ends up happening is you end up paying 3 payments in 2 different months. Those 2 payments added together, or 2 half payments, equal 1 whole payment. And that's how you make the extra payment each month. Now, there's no magic to this. You could make 1 extra payment a month just in the entirety, and it doesn't come out that much worse by any stretch than if you would have done biweekly. But you got to know that some biweekly payment programs have fees attached to them, and there's just no need to pay those fees, because you can do just about the same have the same kind of advantage if you pay for the mortgage just straight up 1 extra payment a year. So just something to think about. I think it's always good to, and that is the good thing about a mortgage, is you do know when your payment date is, and you know when the date is that it's going to be paid off. And as we've talked about many times in the past and today as well, it's all about thinking out of the box, being creative. Maybe not as creative as this article was. Some of the things just didn't make sense to me. Still, once you sell that long-term investment, I get some of what the writer's saying, but I think there's a little bit more to it than just that. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Did you know that we take the program and create a podcast, and we post that podcast on all the platforms that you are probably listening to other podcasts? But if you ever miss a program or you want to listen to it on your own time, you can always do so by going to prudentmoney.com and or just going to whatever site that you like to listen or consume podcasts. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.